Good afternoon. Today is January the 26th, 2022, and welcome to the Ways and Means Bill hearings for the day. First, we have House Bill 41 with Delegate Amprey and one witness. So Delegate Amprey, when you are ready, you may begin.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's good to see all of my colleagues in the Ways and Means Committee. Good to see you all today. Today, I will be presenting on House Bill 41, which is really just a simple bill. What we're aiming to do here is to establish another tax-free week to start off the winter months, to allow families to purchase winter clothing and items that they would need for their children and for families as a whole during the winter months. This bill came to me as a new parent. I have a growing. She's about to be 2 this year, and I find that family members will send stuff or I'll buy stuff, and next thing you know, boom, it no longer fits within a few months. And the reality is, when I used to be a teacher, there's something that I often saw is that some of my students would have light coats or hoodies that they would have to make stretch through the winter months. And that's just, something that we need to address. I know that many families rely on the tax-free week that we have to start off the school year. But the unfortunate reality is that when you start off the school year, you can buy T-shirts, you can buy shorts, you can buy many of the things that at a tax-free cost, with a tax-free that are tax-free. But by the time the winter months come, they don't have heavy coats that they're selling in August and September. For our families and for young people. So the goal of this bill is for us to establish some type of tax-free week during the weeks closer to winter. Currently, as the bill is drafted, we will be starting it the Sunday after Thanksgiving. I am open to a friendly amendment to change the actual time period or days, but the goal that we want to keep in place is that we are creating a space where families can prepare for the coldest months of the year. By being able to provide their families with those winter items that they need. And while, some of us may not see that something being tax-free making that big of a difference, for many of our low-income families, it does make a big difference. For many of those families that have multiple kids, it does make a difference. For many of those families that, like many families in my district living paycheck to paycheck, saving that 6% on an $80 jacket or a $40 jacket can make the difference between being able to buy that jacket. And there's too many students that I see at bus stops freezing cold. And if we can figure out a way to save some families a little bit more money, I think that is something we could do. So I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 41 and look forward to hearing from those. I think we have one person testifying and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah Price, you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. My name is Sarah Price. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association. We have historically partnered with the comptroller to promote the various tax-free periods that occur throughout the year. And we really believe strongly that they have a positive impact on Maryland's local businesses. These periods, they encourage Marylanders to shop locally, to go to their small businesses, to keep their shopping in Maryland. And as the sponsor noted, they can really make a big difference for families that are struggling to make ends meet. So we absolutely would support creating this additional tax-free period. We think it would have a really positive impact on Maryland's businesses and Maryland's families. So with that, we would request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 41. Now moving on to House Bill 202. I see Delegate Carr is here and there is one witness. So whenever you're ready, Delegate Carr, please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Al Carr here to present House Bill 202. It's a bill that improves Maryland's historic revitalization tax credit program by making it more accessible to low and moderate income property owners. Under current law, $5,000 is the minimum rehabilitation expenditure that a homeowner must spend to qualify for the residential tax credit under the historic revitalization tax credit program. Low and moderate income homeowners might have difficulty meeting this threshold due to a lack of sufficient disposable income. House Bill 202 lowers the threshold amount to $2,500 for homeowners who have been granted a homeowner's property tax credit in at least one of the preceding 3 tax years. Recipients of the homeowner's property tax credit must have demonstrated a household income of $60,000 or less. So the basic idea behind this bill is that we want to make sure this historic tax credit program, residential program, is not just available for wealthy people or upper middle class or middle class people, that it's available to a bigger range of homeowners. That's what the bill is designed to do. And I ask for your favorable report.
Very much. Next, Eleanor Cohen for 2 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Ellie Cowan, and I'm the Director of Government Relations at Preservation Maryland. And we are the statewide historic preservation organization, where our aim in preserving the past is that we're ensuring an economically sustainable future for all Marylanders. And so we're very happy to be here in support of House Bill 202, and we thank Delegate Carr for sponsoring this legislation. He did a wonderful job of sort of explaining the impetus behind this. The residential historic tax credit program has been wildly successful in encouraging homeowners to invest in their historic properties, in their homes. And what this bill is trying to do is just to widen the circle, to make it more accessible to low to moderate income families by tying it to the homeowner's property tax credit. We think that that is a good litmus test without a lot of administrative burden to help widen that circle and encourage low to moderate income homeowners to be able to take advantage of this program. So I won't belabor the point. We strongly encourage a favorable report on House Bill 202. Thank you.
Questions for Delegate Carr or his panel? Yes, Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you. Very quickly, I appreciate that it's lowering the threshold for the amount, but it doesn't change any regulations as far as the type of rehab or anything like that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Delegate, for that great question. That is absolutely correct.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
That was the hardest one.
And thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 202. Moving on to House Bill 2. Delegate Stewart.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I see you. Okay. And so you have several witnesses that will come after you for 2 minutes, but whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart, and this is House Bill 62. So long-term care insurance policies can be a great tool for older Marylanders to help pay for services that Medicare doesn't cover, including things like transportation and in-home care. And many working and middle-class Marylanders took advantage of these policies and really did what all the experts recommended they do, which is that they bought these long-term care insurance policies when they were still relatively young and in their 50s or 60s, and they thought they had saved enough money to afford the premiums for the rest of their lives. But unfortunately, the insurance companies did some faulty actuarial math in the 90s and in the 2000s, where they mispriced these plans. They miscalculated how many people would take them up on these plans and how long that those folks would hold on to these policies. And so what that's meant is that the insurance companies have been forced to increase premiums year after year, sometimes all the way up to the 15% premium hike cap under state law. And so there are a lot of Marylanders with these older policies who bought them prior to around 2005 who, they did everything they were supposed to do, but they've had their life savings are on a fixed income, and they've had their life savings extinguished and exhausted to afford these premium increases. And so, one example is that, one person we talked to had a Genworth life insurance policy, and in 2014 they were paying around $3,000 a year, and that was up to $5,000 just 5 years later. And there are a number of other, cases where basically over a 5 or 10 year span, folks' premiums have been, have doubled or even tripled in size. And so HB 62 is very simple. It establishes a tax credit targeted specifically at those seniors who purchased long-term care insurance plans before 2005, which is our rough approximation of when the industry started basically pricing these plans correctly. So these older policies are the ones that have really been a burden for folks. And so this tax credit is targeted specifically at them. And the value of the credit is the lesser of 20% of the eligible premiums paid in a year or $2,000. And there's a means test. The tax credit's not available to taxpayers with an adjusted gross income of $250,000 or more. And I would leave it up to the committee if you all think that's too high, happy to see it lowered. One thing that's important to remember about this population is that there's essentially 3 types of groups who age in Maryland. If you're really wealthy, you don't need to worry about these long-term care insurance plans because you just pay out of pocket for your long-term care. And if you're very poor, then oftentimes you rely on Medicaid to pay for your long-term care expenses. And so the folks that we're talking about here who have been fleeced and hit with these premium hikes are really kind of in a relatively wide band of sort of working class and middle class folks who are too rich for Medicaid, but way too poor to pay out of pocket for these costs. And the seniors who have maintained these plans have really done a valuable service to Maryland taxpayers because they've been hit with these astronomical premium increases year after year, but they've held their policies. They have not abandoned them. And as a result, they've saved us a fortune because otherwise, if they would have abandoned them, they would have relied on Medicaid in all likelihood to pay the expenses. And we would have ended up paying much, much more had they gone that route, and would have been a huge hit to the state budget if even 80% or 50% of these seniors decided to abandon their plans in favor of Medicaid. And so this bill basically rewards this population of seniors for their prudence and also encourages them to keep sticking with their plans into the future. And as we know, especially during this kind of pandemic era, now more than ever, our seniors need financial relief. And this bill is a small step forward to providing more stability and more dignity for our state's oldest and wisest residents. And I urge a favorable report.
Minutes, Edward Weiss. Is Edward Weiss on? Okay, I'll circle back. Next, then Robert Doyle. Hi, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and Ways and Means Committee members. I'm happy to be here today. I'm Bob Doyle. I'm the Vice Chair of the National Active and Retired Federal Employees, well, also acronymed as NARF, of Maryland, the State Legislation Committee. And we want to fully enthusiastically support this bill today. NARF looks out for the interests of about 300,000 federal annuitants in Maryland and many other seniors in our efforts as well. We have advocated for LTC legislation for many years. We've had some of our staff worked on the LTC study commission for a little while back. And we've always supported these measures, and we definitely like this new twist, as Senator, last week we heard Senator Klossmeyer say, of protecting and helping some of these folks who bought these policies a while back and are faced with all the difficulties that Delegate Stewart just outlined. We have a statement with a lot of background data and some of our arguments. So I'll just say a couple other things here. We like the fact that we support a lot of folks, older folks in our organization and other seniors in Maryland who have bought and kept these policies and saved the state quite a bit of money. I think everybody knows how long-term care is so important, and everybody's going to be needing this, a lot of us, as time goes on. So this is a great thing to help people keep their policies. We think that this could, have some people keep the policy instead of dropping it, which is a good thing for the policy holder as well as the state. So I will tell you that again, we support this wholeheartedly, and we see this as a win-win for the taxpayers that hold the policies and a win for the state. And please urge that this get a favorable report. Thank you.
Very much. I do see Edward Bice. So Edward Bice for 2 minutes, please. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm having some bandwidth issues here in Ways and Means. I do see him, but he's not responding. So we'll move on. James Deleganis. Thank you very much for 2 minutes.
Delegate Atterbury and members of the Ways and Means Committee, I am Jim Deleganis, residing at 14608 Pinto Lane in Rockville, Maryland. I speak to you for myself and my wife, Tula, on behalf of others who have chosen to purchase long-term care insurance. My wife and I own policies with MetLife, and as a former MetLife representative and now an independent insurance agent, I have provided policies for more than a dozen individuals and families. In 2005, I received a certificate in long-term care where the need to plan for long-term care was emphasized. Unfortunately, most folks' plan is to wait until the need arises and pay for it out of savings and investments until they run out and then allow Medicaid to pay for it. In the 18 years since we purchased our policies, we have paid well over $75,000 in premiums. Maryland should recognize the responsible action we have taken and act to assist us in paying for this protection. I want to share with you a personal experience my family has had with long-term care. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law both suffered from dementia and needed care for a prolonged period from 2012 to 2020. During that time, she was able to get assistance from MetLife through her long-term care policy, but was declined coverage when he applied. He was declined coverage when he applied in 2004. In total, they still had to pay over $1 million for their care. That money had been planned to leave a legacy for their children, but had to be used to pay for care. The need for long-term care services is increasing, and the cost of care increases too. I urge you to vote favorably to pass House Bill 62. I do believe this is necessary to correct the long overdue oversight in rewarding responsible citizens for the decision to pay a premium to get insurance companies to accept the risk of the need for care. I suggest that the 2005 date is arbitrary.
Sir, we're gonna have to ask you to wrap up your testimony.
Okay, the 2005 date should be changed to 2010, and the $500 one-time fee should be reinstated, maybe made as a 2,000 to provide incentives for people that want to take care of this care.
Thank you. And last, Tammy Bresnahan for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I am Tammy Bresnahan. I'm the Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland. We and our 890,000 members support House Bill 62. We thank Delegate Stewart and Senator Klossmeyer for bringing this bill forward for the last couple of years. You've heard exactly what this bill does. You know, a single illness can slam a retiree with exorbitant bills. You know, when you look at this and you Google and you do some research, Medicaid is the largest payer of long-term care insurance. That means we're all paying for this. And so we believe that people who look to plan to their future deserve some kind of relief. We think that this is a good start and will help people, you know, plan for their future and at least get a little bit of a break. We thank you for hearing our testimony today. We again ask you for a favorable report on House Bill 62, and thanks again.
Questions for the bill sponsor or any of his witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 62. Next, we have our very own Delegate Lukey, House Bill 15, and we have 3 members of E&T that will be joining us for this bill hearing. So let's just make sure that they are in here. Haley or Sarah, I don't see them. So if I'm missing them, just let me know.
This is Delegate Foley. I'm here.
Oh, I see you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Delegate Gilchrist and Delegate Otto are not here yet, but I will call their committee. I can't hear you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Lukey, can you hear me? Okay. I don't know, something's going on with my computer, folks. We're gonna have to get that fixed. So whenever you're ready, Delegate Lukey, you can start.
Sure, absolutely. And this may be an issue that's new to members of the committee. I've worked on legislation previously related to it, but that legislation has always gone to other committees. The legislation in front of you right now, HB 15, focuses on issues of invasive and native plants. And it may seem like a little bit of a niche issue, and in some ways it is, but it's also an issue that has a tremendous amount of impact. So just by way of background, let me define some terms, right? You can classify plants in our region into three categories. One would be native plants. Those are plants that evolved here that are part of our natural environment that have been around forever. But then we have non-native plants, plants that were introduced into the environment by human action, right? So think, and I'm going to keep referring to this one species, but think of English ivy. English ivy is not native to the Mid-Atlantic. It was brought here by early settlers and has grown wild. So you have two types of non-native plants. You have non-native plants that you stick them in the ground, they don't really spread on their own, they're not a big deal. But then you have a category of plants called invasive plants. And invasive plants are plants that often have no natural predators. They are plants that can grow essentially uncontrolled. They spread relatively easily. Why would it be a problem that invasive plants exist in Maryland? Well, there's a number of reasons. One is they crowd out native plants. So from an environmental perspective, the more invasive plants you have, the fewer native plants you can have in a certain space. And as an example of this, when I moved into the house I live in now, my entire front yard was an invasive plant called Japanese stiltgrass. And it had grown so extensively that it just blocked everything else out. The deer don't eat it, so it just grows, on its own. And homeowners will often go, and other land managers will go to great efforts to remove invasive plants because the native plants they block out are plants that our native wildlife relies on, right? So that's one problem. A second problem relates, and this is something that's been getting more attention lately, relates directly to our efforts to confront climate change. Having a mature tree canopy, having healthy forests is one of the most important things we can do to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. And invasive vines like English ivy in particular can kill trees. They do damage to the bark of the trees, they can crowd out the tree's leaves, and so they reduce forest canopy. In fact, in some parts of Maryland, so many invasive vines exist that it's a serious threat to the survival of local trees and to homeowners, because when trees fall, they fall somewhere, right? A third issue is in agriculture. So as invasive plants are introduced into the environment and spread uncontrolled, they can spread into the fields of farmers and ranchers. And that can interfere with farmers and ranchers' ability to grow their own crops. There's some plants that ranchers might not be able, their animals might not consume. And if it's crowding out the plants that they do consume, it creates issues for them. So Maryland, some years ago now, established a program to try to tackle invasive plants. And this bill is designed to strengthen that program, to go after more aggressively some of the invasive plants that are causing problems, and to also promote the use of native plants, which are better for our ecosystem, don't damage agriculture, et cetera. It does this by taking a number of steps. So first of all, in our current law, we allow the Department of Agriculture to classify plants that are invasive into two categories: Tier 1 invasives, which are banned for sale in Maryland, and Tier 2 invasives, which can still be sold, but the person selling them has to have a warning label on them, basically explaining that they are invasive. Unfortunately, the Department of Agriculture has not always had the manpower to keep up with the many invasive species, and some of these species they've chosen not to classify. So the bill takes a list of invasive plants that have been developed by the United States government, Fish and Wildlife Service, in consultation with DNR, and says these plants have been defined as invasive by our government. Let's go ahead and classify them either as Tier 1 or Tier 2. Whether they were in Tier 1 or Tier 2 would be up to the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture would still maintain the ability to add additional plants to the tiers that are not on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service list. Then on the native plant side, The bill requires the Department of Natural Resources to develop and publish on their website a list of native plant species for Maryland, particularly highlighting those species that can be used as alternatives. So for example, if I'm a gardener and I want to plant some vines on my property, what are the native vines I can pick from as opposed to something like English ivy, which can do serious damage as an invasive plant. It also requires that in procurement, any state agencies or plantings done by other entities on projects that include state funding have to prioritize the use of native plants whenever possible. And that phrasing, whenever possible, is key because there are some situations where a non-native plant might be more appropriate for use. But we're trying to create this in law to say that, if you're taking state money, as much as possible, make use of native plants. And then finally, the bill as introduced includes a provision which would eliminate the sales tax on native plants, on plants identified by the Department of Natural Resources as native. So that's what the bill does. It is an important next step in our efforts to deal with invasive plants. It will benefit agriculture, it will benefit our natural environment, it will benefit homeowners. I see it as a win-win. I would urge the committee to give HB 15 a favorable report.
Ryan Frederickson for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Frederickson, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Aquarium. I'm here on behalf of the National Aquarium and as the Maryland affiliate organization of the National Wildlife Federation. As you'll see in our joint written testimony, both the Aquarium and the National Wildlife Federation request your favorable report for HB 15. The bill in front of you has two main goals, as you just heard from the delegate: promoting the purchase and use of native plant species and expanding the classification of invasive plants. You'll hear today about why native plants are vital to a healthy ecosystem and the threat that invasive species pose to biodiversity and to our local habitats. What I want to convey is the importance of Maryland updating the list of Tier 1 and Tier 2 invasive plants. Currently, in the race against preventing the spread of non-native and invasive plant species, we are falling behind. The state created this system for identifying and classifying invasive plants a decade ago. In the last 10 years, only 19 invasive plants have been added to the list. This averages out to less than 2 per year. Meanwhile, experts have identified more than 600 plants that are invasive or at risk of becoming invasive in the Mid-Atlantic. We believe the state should adopt the invasive species listed in the Plant Invaders of the Mid-Atlantic Manual, which is called out in the bill, and that was produced by the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and partially funded by Maryland DNR. This list contains 83 of the most troublesome species, only 12 of which currently appear on Maryland's invasive plant list. There are consequences to the slow pace of recognizing invasive plants in Maryland. Until we can prioritize the classification of more invasive species, we are at risk of causing additional harm to Maryland's important native habitats. For these reasons and more, the National Aquarium and the National Wildlife Federation respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Elizabeth Miller for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. My name is Beth Miller. I thank you for this opportunity to address the committee on behalf of the Green Towson Alliance. Our organization unites Towson area environmentalists in Baltimore County to achieve a greener, healthier, more beautiful community through collaboration and activism. We support House Bill 15 to expand the list of invasive plants that are regulated in Maryland. Here are some examples of how invasive plants are difficult to eradicate, threaten agricultural systems, and can have a negative public health consequence. First, removing invasive plants in natural areas restores healthy habitats. Because of the aggressive nature of invasive plants, it can take months to years to accomplish significant gains. Our weed warriors free mature trees from choking English ivy, but it is demoralizing to know the same invasive vine can be purchased and planted in a Maryland garden nearby, where birds will eat its berries and spread the plant right back into the very same areas. Second, just last week, the Department of Agriculture expanded quarantines throughout Maryland to control the spread of the Asian spotted lanternfly. Lanternflies feed on 70 different types of crops, but the aggressive invasive tree of heaven, the lanternfly's favored host, is not currently listed as an invasive plant in Maryland. Finally, the invasive plants Japanese barberry and honeysuckle play a role in spreading Lyme disease. White-footed mice make their nests under the protection of the prickly branches of barberry and in the dense roots of honeysuckle plants. Tick larvae living on the white-footed mouse pick up the bacteria that cause Lyme disease. Banning the sale of barberry and honeysuckle means less cover for the mice and more predation by hawks, fox, and owls. Fewer mice equal fewer ticks and less Lyme disease in humans. Currently, only one kind of honeysuckle is banned from sale in Maryland. I urge a favorable report on this legislation to stem the damage I've just described being done to our natural areas, crops, and public health by invasive plants. Thank you for your attention to my testimony.
Thank you. Next, Jill Swearigan for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to be here today to speak on this. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Maryland Native Plant Society. I have over 30 years of work on invasive species, first for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and 22 years with the National Park Service. The Maryland Native Plant Society is favorable of the bill HB 15. The source of the plants being the Plant Invaders book is fine, good idea. It includes 80 species that are well entrenched in our ecosystems. And even though that's only about a sixth of the invasive plant species documented for our Mid-Atlantic area, a lot of which are in Maryland, it's a really good start. The species in the book were mostly introduced for ornamental purposes, so that's another important aspect of them. They're all documented by experts, and the book gets peer review every time it's revised. So the other thing is the weed risk assessments is a really good idea, but this would be a lot of species, and every species that needs to be assessed takes a lot of times, months sometimes, and it can be kind of costly. So if that's going to happen, there needs to be funding sufficient to support getting that work done. And we think a 3-year time limit would be good. So the other things I wanted to mention are that we really support the state not funding the purchase of invasive plants for planting. These plants spread into natural areas, which is what they've been doing. And we think that having a native plant list is an excellent idea for the Maryland DNR to maintain. Thank you.
Much. Next, Lily Fountain for 2 minutes, please. Lily Fountain. We can't hear you for some reason. I see you. And it does not look like you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Lily Fountain, Chair of the Natural Places Committee of the Maryland Sierra Club, speaking on behalf of our 70,000 members and supporters across the state in strong support of HB 15. We're pleased to be able to testify on the important issue of managing invasive plants and promoting the use of Maryland native plants. During our decades of stewardship, we have witnessed an explosion of invasive plants and damage to our forests and fields, costing millions of dollars. The small costs of administration or lost revenue from the sales tax exemption are dramatically outweighed by the cost of damage to our agriculture and our environment. The bill would increase the number of problematic invasive species prohibited from sale in Maryland. And by using the report just mentioned, Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic natural areas, the nursery trade, consumers, and government officials will benefit from this comprehensive, widely respected handbook. The bill also prescribes a list of native plant alternatives to these invasives. Some of the many benefits from this bill include preservation of forests, which mitigate temperature extremes and decrease stormwater problems because the diversity of root depths allows the ground to hold more water. Why is this bill important? Without a wide range of native plants that Maryland wildlife co-evolved with, we lose the biodiversity that sustains us. For example, if one type of bee is wiped out by disease, we need different bee species that can pollinate our native plants and our crops. We recommend the allocation of adequate resources for invasive plant assessments and also the enforcement within a 3-year time limit. In conclusion, to ensure stable ecosystems and to support a strong Maryland economy, the Maryland Sierra Club recommends a favorable report for HB 15. Thank you.
Finally, Doug Myers for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Doug Myers. I'm the Maryland Senior Scientist at Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We're in strong support of House Bill 15. House Bill 15 seeks to ensure that trees planted to mitigate the loss of forest through development and for environmental restoration purposes under the control of state agencies are native species that help restore the local ecosystems. I can speak from experience with our 10 million tree campaign in Pennsylvania. This also sends a very strong market signal to plant nurseries to carry more native plants. And I think that's a good thing that will encourage people to use more native plants wherever they are, considering their landscaping needs. The strength of native species and their adaptations reduces the need for fertilizer and pesticide use and lessens the potential for pollution runoff to the bay. I would add to that that native species, because of what you just heard from Lily about the different root depths, helps to protect against floods and droughts that are typical of their native range, way better than the invasive species do, which often have very shallow roots. Native plants provide food and cover for wildlife that are critical to the Bay region's ecosystems, and non-natives may become invasive species that threaten ecosystems and create additional hurdles to conservation, even though we may not know how invasive they are now. So for all these reasons, we urge a favorable report on HB 15. Thank you for your time.
For the bill sponsor or for any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 15. Thank you, Delegate Foley, for joining us. Next, House Bill 27, Delegate Lukey, again, and some witnesses. So whenever you're ready, Delegate Lukey, you can begin.
Sure. Thank you again, Madam Chair. This bill relates to a credit that we've already heard about a little bit today. So House Bill 27 relates to the historic revitalization tax credit. And let me take a second because we've got some new members of the committee. So the historic revitalization tax credit actually has multiple components to it. One of them is a residential credit, which Delegate Carr's bill from earlier in the hearing applied to. House Bill 27 doesn't affect the residential credit in any way. But then there are also two commercial credits, which are under the historic revitalization tax credit. One of them, the larger, is the competitive commercial credit. And this is a credit used to help incentivize the reuse of historic properties for modern purposes. There are examples all over the state, but I'm sure some of the other people testifying can mention specific examples. But essentially what will happen is this credit will help a developer to pencil out a project that takes a historic building and restores it for use as multifamily housing or commercial space or manufacturing or whatever it is, right? And then there's also a small commercial credit. And the small commercial credit is a program that we designed a few years ago that focuses on smaller scale commercial projects that don't quite qualify for the competitive commercial credit. And that was created as sort of an experiment to see how it would work. Well, it turns out the small commercial credit has been wildly successful. It was oversubscribed almost immediately. And the money that was appropriated to it was used up. A couple years ago, we put in an additional $1 million into that program. That money too was almost immediately used up. So one of the things that this bill does is it mandates an annual $4 million in funding for the small commercial program to make sure it's capitalized for small commercial projects down the road. On the competitive commercial program, that program has been wildly successful. The data we have says that for every dollar we invest in the program, it returns about $8 to the Maryland economy. For every $1 million we invest in that program, we create dozens of jobs, particularly constructions and trade jobs, working on these properties. And just as importantly, this is an important economic development tool. For communities with aging buildings, creating this economic incentive for those buildings to be reused is a reinvestment in those communities. And we've seen properties and communities across the state that have helped anchor economic revitalization efforts in, from Cumberland to Cambridge. Baltimore City is another part of the state that's benefited tremendously. We're also going to see over the next few years a lot of buildings in the suburbs start to qualify for these credits, in part because the programs work on properties that are 50 years or older, or at least 50 years old. And the big building, post-World War II building boom that created a lot of our suburbs in Baltimore and Anne Arundel and Howard and Prince George's and Montgomery counties, those buildings are starting to age. A lot of those buildings are starting to age into the program. So it's going to be an economic development tool of broader use in a lot of parts of the state. Our program has been underfunded. It's been underfunded for years, despite the fact that we know how successful it is. Until recently, it had been funded at $9 million a year, and it has always been oversubscribed. Last year, this committee acted to increase it temporarily to $12 million a year for a couple years while we took the time to figure out what we wanted to do with the program to help strengthen it. I'm proposing in this program that we significantly increase over the fiscal years after that $12 million is in effect, the funding for the program. So the bill would mandate that the funding go up from $12 to $24 million for FY25 and 26, and then again to $36 million for FY27 and 28. I should note that this number is still lower than many of our neighboring competitive states. So part of the issue here is maintaining the competitiveness of our building industry compared to other states. And with that, I will turn it over to our much more well-informed people testifying today and ask the committee for a favorable report.
Next, Ellie Cohen for 2 minutes, please.
Great, thank you. Ellie Cowan, Director of Government Relations at Preservation Maryland, back again to talk about the benefits of the historic preservation tax credit. Thank you so much, Delegate Lutke, for really outlining the benefits of the two programs that HB 27 seeks to help. So the competitive commercial credit, as Delegate Lutke said, is really these large keystone projects that really have the ability to catalyze neighborhood revitalization all across the state. HB 27 would seek to drastically increase the funding for this competitive program, but it's not a handout because you have this incredible 8-to-1 return on investment. It's also a proven job creator, but without more funding, the economic benefits of the credit can't be impactful. And so in order to stay regionally competitive and for these credits to have impact, we would ask for your support of HB 27. For the small commercial credit, now these are projects that, I believe every district in this committee probably has a project that would qualify for it. It's Main Street scale historic structures that currently right now is closed. It has no funding because even despite the stopgap funding that passed out of this committee last year, it's been oversubscribed within, I believe it was 3.5-4 months. So the need is there, the funding's not. HB 27 would address that by annually funding it at $4 million. The bottom line here is that this tax credit helps businesses big and small, and there's shovel-ready projects across the state that would bring value to many industries that can't move forward without more funding for this credit. The state must invest in its community revitalization programs that work, and I believe that the time to do so is now. So I respectfully request a favorable report of HB 27. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, John Renner, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name's John Renner. I work with Cross Street Partners, a real estate development company that focuses on historic preservation. I also have my own small business that revitalizes historic properties. Therefore, it's not a surprise to hear that I enthusiastically support an expansion to the competitive commercial tax credit and new funding for the small commercial tax credit. Thanks to these programs, we have completed numerous historic preservation projects in distressed neighborhoods around Baltimore City. And additionally, we're in the process of completing the packing house in Cambridge, Maryland, and we'll start construction on Baltimore Penn Station in a couple of weeks. Due to high costs and the complexity of these types of projects, none of them would have moved forward without the state historic tax credit. I can't emphasize enough the importance of state funding for these projects, not only the tax credits, but the grants and bond bills. Unfortunately, due to the limited funding that you've already heard about each year, the program is highly competitive. For every building we submit, there are 2 or 3 potential projects that we decide not to submit because the probability of funding is so low. Given the depth of need around the state, the program could easily use the $36 million a year that's ultimately contemplated in this legislation. Same problem exists with the small commercial credit. The legislature has made it so darn effective that it's oversubscribed and currently out of money. The return on investment for these tax credits is fantastic. Job and business creation, income and property taxes, the ability to leverage federal resources like the federal historic tax credit and new markets tax credits. And finally, just the larger community revitalization impact that occurs when you rehabilitate a significant historic structure like the packing house in Cambridge or Hohen Lithograph in Baltimore City. Thanks again for allowing me to speak.
Next, Sarah Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in strong support of HB 27. The Maryland Retailers Association has a partnership with the Main Street Maryland program, which includes 33 officially designated Main Street districts across the state from Oakland to Ocean City. The qualifications to gain that official designation do include that a community must have a significant number of historic commercial buildings. As such, expanding the historic revitalization tax credit would have a direct positive impact on Maryland's Main Street communities. It would also help other communities to meet that qualification for becoming an officially designated Main Street by incentivizing developers and businesses to utilize historic commercial districts. This would boost the state's small businesses by providing additional communities access to grant funding and other unique resources that are available from the state and the Retailers Association. Mandating funding and making sure that these credit opportunities remain available into the future will have a real, tangible, positive impact on Maryland's economy and its business community. With this in mind, we would urge a favorable report on HB 27. Thank you for your consideration.
Next, we have Terrence Moore for 2 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity today to lend my voice in support of HB 27 and garner yours for legislation to fund the historic revitalization tax credit. As you've heard, the revitalization economy embraces the entire breadth of historic community rehabs, including developers, contractors, artisans, and designers. The benefit of these rehabs can be felt by community residents as well as business owners for generations, as they are also used to close some of the wealth gap in divested communities. In addition, rehab employs thousands of Marylanders in well-paying permanent positions. Despite the return on investment, this program has been underfunded, which has created an obstacle for it to reach its greatest potential and across the communities across Maryland. HB 27 legislation to create the small commercial project trust account and mandate funding through fiscal year 31 offers stability to the program that will create jobs, revitalize communities, preserve history, lost, hidden, or forgotten, and stimulate economies, all of which are needed in Western Maryland. This program provides the opportunity for large and small private sector businesses to engage in a recovery, which ultimately and exponentially returns more to the state treasury than it would be to cost to fund this tax credit. The historical revitalization tax credit would prove beneficial to the redevelopment of Washington County's historic residential and commercial districts, including Main Street projects taken on by individual and small developers. I would also refer you to the Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area Economic Impact Study released last year that measures the economic value of Carroll, Frederick, and Washington County's heritage area at over $450 million as evidence of potential return on investment to support of development incentives in historical communities. Thank you for your time and any consideration or support you may lend to HB 27 as a local small business owner, realtor, co-founder of the Western Maryland Community Development Corporation and Preservation Maryland partner. I strongly support this bill and believe it would be a valued resource to Washington County's community and economy, especially considering the current state. Thank you.
Are there any questions for, oh, we have one more person, sorry, Khalil Yukta, for 2 minutes, please.
Khalil Ukta, thank you. My name is Khalil Ukta, and I am an owner of Charm City Buyers. We are a real estate development and education firm based in Baltimore City, and we are in strong support of HB 27. The small commercial tax credit is critical to development in the state. Since its inception, I've been the owner and or lead developer in projects that have received over $1.1 million in small commercial tax credits. This most recent fiscal year, we received $150,000 out of the $1 million stopgap for our projects. This program is fundamental to the success of small commercial development in Baltimore City and other areas. Let me put it this way. Without the program, none of these houses that we have built, none of the homeowners that we've brought into the city who now pay property taxes and support the city would have been built. Not only do we need the $4 million annual funding, but we also need stopgap funding for this next fiscal year. Momentum is critical, and we cannot afford to lose it. This program takes a project where the economics do not work and allows for the economics to work. In fact, I would not be able to eliminate vacant properties without the program. As I conclude here, I'd like to share a more personal story. My brother is a firefighter for Howard County. I know firsthand through his experiences what it takes to pass the academy. And as a former Division I track and field athlete, I question whether I have both the physical capacity and the mental fortitude to do what every firefighter has done. To lose 3 men and women because of vacant row home fires outrages me, and it should outrage everybody else here. These deaths could have been prevented. And it takes people like me doing the work and others on this call doing the work. And it takes folks like you all committing to the funds to reverse the decades of disinvestment in order to eliminate vacant houses and other properties. Give me and other developers the tools that we need to be as successful as possible in creating beautiful homes and bringing life. Without the tools, if you take them away, then unfortunately we leave behind vacant, blighted properties that are literally killing our cities. Thank you.
Questions for the bill sponsor or any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 27. Moving to House Bill 2, Delegate Lukey again. It's Delegate Lukey Day, guys.
But this is the last bill I have today. So I've talked to you about invasive and native plants. I've talked to you about historic revitalization. Now we're going to talk about jobs. As veteran members of the committee know, we've talked for years in this committee about how to best incentivize new job creation in Maryland and incentivize employers to hire folks who might be struggling to find employment. And I think that goal is even more important and brought even into even starker contrast by the pandemic, because the story of the economy in the pandemic has really been two stories. It's been a story of, wealthy and middle class folks who have by and large done all right economically. And it's been a story of folks who have become unemployed and in some cases stayed unemployed, who have struggled to get the assistance they need. And this bill will help with that. So what this bill does is it creates a Maryland match for a federal credit called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit is one of the most successful federal tax credit programs. What it does is it creates an incentive for businesses to hire people who might be struggling to find work. And you can read in the fiscal note the full list of folks who it incentivizes hiring from, but it includes people on public assistance, like temporary assistance for needy families. It includes returning citizens. It includes veterans. It includes people with disabilities who've gone through voc rehab. It includes recipients of supplemental Social Security income. It includes people on long-term unemployment. So these are groups that struggle to find work, and it's really a deep problem. The rates of unemployment in these categories of workers are much higher than the rates of unemployment generally. The program, the evidence we have about the WOTC at the federal level is pretty clear. It works. It is a successful program. It does what it says it's going to do. So the idea is fairly simple. We simply increase the incentive by creating a match under the state income tax code for the federal credit. And the beauty of this proposal is we don't have to create a new infrastructure. We're riding on a federal program that already exists. So it's much easier to administer from a tax perspective, because essentially what we're doing is identifying, okay, did you receive the federal credit? You also qualify for the state credit. Now, I should mention also there is an amendment that's been requested that I'm working on that I think the committee should consider. The federal credit does allow, in the case of veterans, for nonprofit organizations to also make use of the credit. And I've drafted an amendment to that end, which I'll be happy to share with members of the committee. But I just think this, as I've learned more about this program, I get more and more excited. This is a program that has the potential to create a lot of jobs in Maryland, to help a lot of people who are struggling to find work, to make a huge difference in our effort to ensure economic prosperity for Marylanders. And I would urge the committee to give it a favorable report.
Next, Donald Fry for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Don Fry, President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Committee. We're a regional business organization comprised of over 400 companies, not-for-profits, foundations, educational institutions, and our mission is to find solutions to problems that affect the competitiveness and viability of our region. We are here supportive of House Bill 2, creating that non-refundable tax credit against the state income tax. As you've heard, it's modeled widely from the federal work opportunity tax credit that's been in existence since the mid-1990s, and has provided that credit to employers for hiring individuals who are considered to face significant barriers to employment. I'm certainly not going to repeat many of the items that Doug Aluki indicated, but we certainly think that this is a great program. By doing so, it helps employers to hire and retain those employees from those targeted groups or communities that have been underrepresented or have experienced discrimination in the workforce, including women, poor, and people of color. The bill is advantageous to employers because it leverages the federal funding to encourage businesses to employ those with significant barriers, but also assists individuals who are still struggling for job opportunities due to the economic displacement. It's in line with the GBC's operational strategies on advancing racial equity and social justice, maintaining a competitive business environment and creating pipelines for workers, and also consistent with one of our tenets of our Gaining the Competitive Edge report, which identified 8 key pillars for economic growth and job creation. That is to have the state invest in strategic and effective investments for business growth, nurturing business and job growth in general. So for the reasons stated forth by the sponsor and by others that you'll hear, and we've also submitted written testimony, Greater Baltimore Committee would urge a favorable report on House Bill 2. Thank you.
Thank you. And the committee would like to congratulate you on your 20 years with GBC. We know that you've announced your retirement, so congratulations on that decision, and very, very well deserved. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next, for 2 minutes, Scott Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chairman Atterbury. Scott Jensen, I am from Easton, Maryland. I'm coming in support of House Bill 2 today, really from 2 perspectives. Some of you, for example, Delegate Lidke, I know from being the Deputy Secretary of Labor here in Maryland under the O'Malley administration. And the last 6 years I've spent working for Governor Gina Raimondo in Rhode Island, where I was labor secretary. I'm here to support this bill because it's a great idea. That little extra for businesses who are willing to help folks with significant barriers is a big deal for those folks with significant barriers. To get people into an opportunity is important for them for sure. But I do want to stress the economic development value of this tax credit. And I just do so very quickly by pointing out that this is not just about a financial motive for businesses. It is a really important tool for workforce developers. If you can talk with businesses, if you can get them, for example, in the context of the Earn Maryland program or some of the other great things that the state's doing, if you can get employers to be excited about targeting talented people who are facing barriers, this is an excellent way to make that proposition even better for them. So I'd support a yes vote on this, and I think it's a great idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Adam Kane for 2 minutes, please. Adam Kane,
Yeah,
I see you.
yeah, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and thank you to Delegate Lukey for working on this issue. My name is Adam Kane. I'm with the Allegis and Redwood companies. We're a Maryland-based large employer. We have over 20,000 employees in the state of Maryland. A lot of companies that are marquee Maryland names are our companies, such as Trade Point Atlantic, Aerotech, Erickson Living, Tech Systems, and many others. And so we're very proud of our partnership with the state of Maryland being, a very large Maryland-based company. This idea is a great idea and has, a very unique sort of broad-based coalition. There's not that many sort of tax items that have support from both business, labor, and social justice organization, because it's a very unique tax credit that is really tied to very significant and important social aims. As the other witnesses said, it's based on a federal tax credit that targets traditional groups that have faced barriers to employment. As some of the witnesses said, some of these groups still have significantly high unemployment rates. And in addition, we have low labor participation rates. So even as the unemployment rate has come down in Maryland and across the nation, our labor force participation rate has not recovered and is still lower than pre-pandemic levels. And that is why, part of the reason why we see this struggle to match employment with available workforce. And so part of the aim of this tax credit is important for the economy as well as the social dignity of our society, is to really encourage businesses to go and offer better incentives and be more creative to get people who are not in the workforce to choose to come off of the public programs and participate in the workforce to grow our economy and to have the dignity and security of having employment. So it's a very unique credit, as Mr. Jensen said, and Delegate Lukey. It's really a state federal program right now because the state does the certifications for the federal government.
I'm going to have to ask you, sorry to interrupt, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments.
Thank you. It's unique because the state does the certification for the federal government. And so it's administratively simple for business and the state. So thank you very much and look forward to working with the committee.
Thank you. Next, we will have Kayla Mock for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I thank you for your time and attention to the House Bill 2, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. My name is Kayla Mock. I'm a political organizer with United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 400. We represent over 10,000 members in Maryland in grocery, retail, food processing and distribution, law enforcement, healthcare. We have a bit of a hodgepodge under our belt here. Our members have been on the front lines of this ongoing pandemic since the beginning. They feed and serve their communities. They've carried us through and kept our economy going as safely as possible. To say that the pandemic has hit our members hard is a bit of an understatement. Being frontline workers, we're kind of in a strange spot where a majority of our workers didn't get laid off during the pandemic, like service workers. On the other side, our members were struggling to keep up with demand. While being hit hard with mental and physical strains of the pandemic, the fear of getting sick or bringing illness back to their homes and their families, they were also struggling with the severe worker shortages that we were seeing and still are seeing. We've all seen the longer lines, the empty shelves, the manufacturing delays. It's just another unfortunate side of COVID. So we support HB2. We believe that amongst other great things that it'll help open up a pool of workers that are often overlooked by employers. And that these people are often, the first and hardest hit by the pandemic. Our hope is that HB2 will encourage employers to hire from ignored groups of applicants and help fill a gap in the worker shortage we're currently facing. For our members and all of Marylanders, we urge a favorable report for HB2. Thank you.
Next, Sarah Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Sarah Price. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of HB2. This would encourage businesses to expand their applicant pools while having a positive impact on their labor and operational costs, creating more inclusive workplace environments in Maryland. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a massive labor shortage, as we've just discussed, which has impacted businesses' abilities to operate and serve their customers. Many small retail businesses have scaled back their hours, not only due to lack of workers, but also because their revenues still have not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels, which impacts their ability to support additional staff. The credit proposed in this legislation would help to target employment opportunities for disadvantaged individuals by helping employers with those labor costs. It's a win-win situation. Beyond the pandemic, this will have a positive impact on Maryland's communities by investing in individuals who may experience any of a wide variety of barriers and providing them with expanded opportunities. This is an excellent common sense proposal and is a positive step forward for Maryland's business environment and community at large, and it will promote positive work environments while tapping into additional labor pools while workers are desperately needed. For these reasons, we would urge a favorable report. Thank you for your time.
The last witness to testify is Henry Bogdan for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Henry Bogdan. I'm the Policy Director at Maryland Nonprofits. We're a statewide association of over 1,300 nonprofit organizations and institutions. Here in support of the bill with the amendment that the sponsor alluded to. We want to thank Delegate Lutke for having that prepared. As he pointed out, the bill as it's written covers everyone who is eligible to receive credits under the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, but there is no provision in the bill that would allow a tax-exempt employer who doesn't pay income tax to take advantage of the credit, while the federal credit does for the veterans program. There's 5 categories of veterans. At the federal level, as in my written testimony, nonprofit employers are allowed to take the credit against their employer share of Social Security tax. This is a relatively newer concept at the federal level. It goes back to the Affordable Care Act, and you saw it in different provisions during CARES Act, where nonprofit employers were able to make the same use of tax credits as for-profits, but using it against the Social Security liability. In Maryland, we have for a longer period of time had a way that nonprofits can use tax credits. The existing tax credit for hiring persons with disabilities has included nonprofit employers for over 20 years now, I believe. The tax credit for employer costs of providing commuter benefits and services includes nonprofit employers. It's done by allowing nonprofit employers to use the credit against their employer withholding tax liability with the comptroller. That's a legal liability of the nonprofit employer to withhold wages from employees and pay it to the comptroller. Giving them a credit against that amount has the same effect on the Treasury as the income tax credit does for a for-profit employer. This has worked well without hitches on those 2 credits in Maryland for a good while. We hope you'll support the amendment, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I do see there are questions. Delegate Buckles' hand's been up so long, it's probably tired. So we'll start with Delegate Buckle.
My Zoom hand is very worked up, Madam Chair, very worked up. Now, I just had a question for my friend, the bill sponsor. As I was reviewing, you guys know I'm not a technological guy, so I actually have my aide still print off all the stuff like it's 1997, and I read it as we do the hearings. I kind of like this bill, and I noticed that the Rural Maryland Council is supportive of it, and one of the categories is to employ people, just residents of an empowerment zone or a rural renewal county. Can you describe a little bit more, like who would that include? I mean, that seems to be not so much just to the particular category of the individual, but it would apply very broadly to areas that maybe need more employment incentives.
I think Adam might be best to respond to that question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. Obviously, the empowerment zone is sort of a federal designation of underserved areas. I honestly am not familiar with the rural designation, but that's something we could certainly look into quickly and get back to you. But
Okay.
as some underserved characteristics in the rural area.
All right, and I saw that the Rural Maryland Council supported it. I'm really happy. Those who served on the committee, I have a very soft spot, as I think most of us do, for people that have disabilities. And this will incentivize the hiring of people who have different levels of disabilities and can still work. And then I found something, Delegate Lukey, that surprised me a little bit as I was looking through my packet of papers. There's a letter here from Kiefer Mitchell, the Chief Legislative Officer of the Hogan administration, that, I'd like to think I read at a fairly high level, and it seems to suggest that the Hogan administration is pretty supportive of this concept. Is that your understanding?
I did not seek the support of the administration, but I will take it on this bill. And I hope I'm going to reach back out to them that they'll support my bill to restore the union dues deduction as well. But we'll see about that one.
That one may be a bridge too far, Lukey, a bridge too far, but I appreciate it when we can work together. So thank you. It's an interesting bill. I really appreciate some of the clarification.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for the bill sponsor or any of the witnesses? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 2. Moving on to our final bill of the day, House Bill 158, Delegate Jazz Lewis, and he has several witnesses. Hello, Delegate Lewis.
Hello, Madam Chair, House Committee on Ways and Means. Thank you all for having me. I will go right in. Give me 1 minute. So this bill, we love really simple bills here in the Maryland General Assembly. This simple bill is also a job. It is focused on providing resources to the formerly incarcerated, training on entrepreneurship, as well as setting aside resources for them to start up their own businesses in particular. As many of you who know me, I'm very passionate about criminal justice reform. And one of the things that we found is with the disproportionate incarceration that we have seen in this country, the scarlet letter of a criminal conviction also makes it very hard for you to get gainful employment once you leave. So as we all have been working towards figuring out how do we address this to lower the recidivism rate, address issues of racial wealth inequality, I saw a bill, a pilot that our United States Senior Senator, Senator Ben Cardin, worked on called the New START Act for the country. My bill is named after his bill, the Maryland New START Act. What the bill does is that it establishes a 5-year pilot program in the Department of Commerce with assistance from the Governor's Office of Small, Women, and Minority Business Affairs to award grants to organizations that provide entrepreneurial development training and support to the formerly incarcerated. The program includes an in-person business plan competition, reentry and reintegration services, as well as a work readiness program, executive mentoring with local business owners, and entrepreneurial training, as I stated. And the last part is access to finance. Ms. Bidfa, through Department of Commerce, will be able to provide up to $50,000 of loans to qualifying participants of the program to help returning citizens establish businesses. Through the Maryland New START Act, returning citizens would have the resources to start a venture and create a new life for themselves and their loved ones. And this idea is already working in other states and other organizations, particularly Inmates to Entrepreneurs is a national organization that's changing lives for formerly incarcerated, as well as these businesses grow, they are employing people, which I think we can all agree on. So please allow Maryland to be the next state to reduce prison populations and allow those who have been incarcerated to stably restart their lives, invest in our economy, and improve their communities. I urge a favorable vote on this bill.
Thank you, Delegate Lewis. Next, Christopher Dews for 2 minutes, please.
Wonderful. Thank you all for having me. My name is Christopher Dews, and I'm the Senior Policy Advocate of the Job Opportunities Task Force, where our mission is to help lower wage workers advance to higher wage jobs. We support the New START Act as a means of expanding access to capital and skills training for those who are seeking to start their own employment opportunities for themselves, especially if they have a criminal record. A criminal record can be both the cause and consequence of poverty. There are over 1,100 collateral consequences of having a criminal record, including barriers to employment, housing, licensing, education, public assistance, and even business loans. Every year in Maryland, 15,000 people return from state prisons and recidivate within 3 years. Up to 60% of incarcerated persons recidivate because they can't find a job. After 1 year of release, they find themselves reincarcerated. They find themselves unemployed. I apologize. This is mainly due to the fact that employers perform background checks and deny employment on the basis of a record. Any past criminal conviction reduces job offers by half, leaving millions in the cold when it comes to obtaining gainful employment. When securing employment through traditional means becomes untenable, many opt for entrepreneurial ventures. That's when we run into the issue that the bill seeks to address, namely access to startup capital, networking, and the skills training needed to get them up and running. As the act is currently written, grant funded will be sent to qualified community-based providers to train returning citizens who wish to defeat the barriers to employment by hiring themselves and giving them entrepreneurial training, as well as an up to $50,000 grant. We see this, if properly implemented and targeted to providers that have actual experience with this community, as a massive boon to move returning citizens to a place of financial stability. And for those reasons, we urge strongly a favorable report. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Next, for 2 minutes, please, Kimberly Haven.
Good morning, Madam Chair, or good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Haven. I'm here today on behalf of From Prison Cells to PhD and Forward Justice Maryland. But my testimony today is more from a personal slant. During my incarceration, I met some of the most brilliant, smart, savvy, and talented individuals who, had opportunity and resources been made available and accessible, their trajectory could have been very different. This legislation is proactive, forward-thinking efforts by our state and shows our commitment to successful reentry. This bill encourages individuals to pursue dreams of entrepreneurship. When employers won't hire because of a criminal record, we encourage entrepreneurship, but without training, support, education, or funding, basically a setup to fail. Of particular interest to me is women and minorities. Systems-impacted individuals are encouraged. Nope, they're overtly told to pursue low-level, low-paying jobs, but they are talented. Every hustle they do to survive and rebuild their lives is actually them being entrepreneurs. Imagine what they could do with the support and training this legislation includes. Maryland has amazing organizations. Forward Justice Maryland, From Prison Cells to PhD, Out for Justice, Maryland Justice Project, Life After Release, JOTF, to name several, who stand at the ready to work with and ensure this program's success. This legislation will position Maryland as a leader on this issue. And finally, an entrepreneur who participates in this program will realize their dream and take a step towards removing the scarlet F that those of us with felony convictions wear. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 158. I thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Next, Deborah Dews for 2 minutes, please.
I think that might be incorrect. That's just.
Yeah, I was wondering, I said, wow, you have the same last name.
Yeah. Sorry, that was awkward.
Okay, no worries. Moving on, Bill Henry for 2 minutes, please. No? Okay.
Madam
Oh,
Chair, I think this might be a list from, I think there might be some confusion with the list because those are names from a different hearing. Just gonna throw that out there.
okay, I'm gonna, Antoine Quarles, is that a different list? Nicole Hansen?
Nicole
Okay.
Hansen was supposed to testify, but I believe she's on another call as of right now. I do apologize for that.
Is Antoine Quarles? And then there's a Jonathan Dews. Everybody has your last name today.
Yeah, this was
Okay, but well, who I do see, welcome, former Senator Delegate Barbara Robinson. Good to see you, my soror.
Yes, hello, everybody. I'm seeing some names, some faces here that I remember Daryl and Senator Barnes, and I'm so glad, Chairwoman, that to see you in that position. And when they called me, and also another soror, Edith Patterson, when they called me about this bill, I really got excited because this is something that I've been working with and working on for over 40 years. House Bill 158, working with returning citizens, or we call them ex-offenders when I was working with them, but I've done training with ex-offenders, with returning citizens for over 40 years. I spent 7 years going into the prison, training in economic development, job retention, job readiness. I've also been an adjunct professor. I've taught at 3 different colleges in Baltimore, job readiness again, and I've already written my 2nd book. By the way, my 9th book was just released yesterday, but my 2nd book is on entrepreneurship and how to start a business. And I've taught that here in Baltimore and in Africa for over 30 years. So when I saw this, this is one of the bills that we talk about to decrease the rate of recidivism. And I see this as absolutely needed. And when I learned that Delegate Jazz was introducing this bill, I said, yeah, it's time, well overdue. So I'm actually here in full support of this bill in the way that it can. I've met so many returning citizens or so many individuals when I taught in prison that could actually be successful business owners if they were given the chance. And a number of them have not been given the chance because there has not been a program such as this that could actually help them. Although we started working on something like this when I was in the House of Delegates, but it didn't come to fruition. So I just want you to know that and I'm also one of the founders of the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce. And we've been working with this group for years as well. So I'm actually here in strong support, and whatever I can do, let me know. And Delegate Jazz, I get emails from you all the time. So continue to get in touch and whatever I can do to help you specifically with this bill and with others like this, you have my full support. So I thank all of you for listening, and I thank you for what you have continued to do in order to help those who are so much in need.
Thank you. So good to see you. Thank you so much. Next, we have Monica Cooper, please, for 2 minutes.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, I'm extremely nervous, and it's crazy because I'm in my home and I'm still nervous. That's insane. Forgive the poor lighting because I'm in my home. But I want to say that I am Monica Cooper. I am in strong favor of this bill. I am an elected official. I am elected to the 40th District State Central Committee. I am the executive director of the Maryland Justice Project. I am the proud owner of We Solar, one of the rarest companies to be established by a Black woman in the solar industry. And I am a returning citizen. I want that returning citizen to be something that's last, because I'm all of those things. I am true American grit. I am perseverance. What you're looking at right now is the true American story. And I'm hoping to be headed towards a brand new industry, a thriving industry, one where I can help produce jobs. I want to be a job producer. And not only do I want to be a job producer, but I have a direct pulse on those people who are unemployed and that need our help to get back into the market. I am a part of Joe Biden's plan. You're looking at her. You are looking at her. So I really want to just ask you guys to vote in favor of this. And please keep Monica Cooper in mind when you think about an American businesswoman. Thank you, guys. And I'm not as nervous no more because my time is up.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story with us today. Last, I have Dr. Carmen Johnson for 2 minutes, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I am glad to be here. I hope you guys can hear me. I am on business travel, so I'm sitting in a restaurant, so please forgive me. But I work for Life After Release, and I also myself has started a nonprofit called Helping Ourselves to Transform. Our mission on both organizations is supporting returning citizens and equipping them with the tools they need to succeed. We support access to entrepreneur training and capital for returning citizens, but have some slight concerns. And we do also believe that this bill is proactive. However, one of the concerns is loans and interest. The bill works with the SBA to provide 50,000 in loans, but does not state a solid window for payback of that loan or interest rate. We believe language should be added to minimize the interest rate to 2% max and have an off-ramp for loan forgiveness. This could be that if they start a business in an in-demand service that the state needs. We do not want to create a situation where returning citizens are in a worse situation than when they first started within the 5 years. The financial training, that's paramount. Financial literacy is not highlighted, which is the lack of a dangerousness for new business owners, especially ones that are coming home from behind the wall. Number 3, if these concerns are addressed, we believe that this bill would be extremely effective in supporting those returning from incarceration who wish to start their own business. And my own personal concern is the credit. If the returning citizen has credit issues, how will this impact them with SBA? So getting an SBA loan. So my thought is that not only should the organization that's offering financial literacy and entrepreneurship to the returning citizen, grants should also be offered to the returning citizen. And I appreciate you guys listening to my testimony, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We couldn't tell you were in a restaurant. We thought you were in space. Are there any questions for any of the witnesses or the bill sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 158. That also concludes the Ways and Means Committee's bill hearings for today. Tomorrow, folks, I will see you at 11 a.m. for a briefing. We also have bill hearings at 1 o'clock, and we will have a very quick voting session at 15 minutes after our bill hearings end. So see you tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Thank you, committee.